And then we come to the second Dark Age of Sonic. I call it second Dark Age because technically Sonic already had a Dark Age after Sonic 3 Knuckles, but before Sonic Adventure. But it just wasn't as pronounced because the bad games mostly were spin-offs or like Game Gear games and stuff. So nobody really cared about them. But with 3D games, it was a lot more significant, so people just act like it's the only Dark Age that existed until Boon came out. Some people think that the Dark Age started with Heroes, but again, a lot of people thought Heroes wasn't as good as SE2. It was still a good game, at least. The Shadow the Hedgehog game is where things started falling apart. The controls were pretty terrible, like you were always jumping around to make sure you wouldn't fall off the edge because you would slip and slide everywhere. Like he controlled like he was on ice, and I'm guessing it was because of the whole rocket booster shoe thing, but still. There's also the mission-based structure of the game, where there were all sorts of different missions. Like you had to kill every single monster in the level, and if you didn't do that, then you failed. Thankfully, they introduced a checkpoint system where you could warp between checkpoints to make it more convenient backtracking. You know, I think every Sonic game should do that. Every video game should do that. But unfortunately, like at least you could skip the most annoying missions, like the Artificial Chaos one, but that usually requires like replaying missions you already played. A lot of people like to take the neutral path by just going straight to the goal ring for every level. And that's good, you know, that's how it should be. Like, I think Shadow the Hedgehog would have been improved if they had a hub world and you could go to different areas of the hub world to do dark or hero or neutral missions. And all those missions would just be go to the goal ring, but they would have different levels. I think that would have actually been a lot better. And like you would justify it as you talking to different characters to enlist different missions. They have this kind of confusing plot with the whole branching pathways thing because it's evil or good, you decide. But the problem is that the plot becomes incoherent because it relies on, well, for one, Black Doom just randomly warping Shadow all over the place, messing with his chaos control. So he just sort of randomly shows up in certain areas, but more importantly, it doesn't really feel like there's any proper consequences to your actions. And this leads me into one of the biggest problems I have with Shadow's story. It tries too hard to be edgy and doesn't try hard enough to be dark and thus emotionally compelling, like it could have been. Because there are no real consequences and no real dwelling on actions. Like, you can be a wild card betraying the heroes all game and they'll still ask you for help in the missions. It would have been more compelling if they distrusted you for betraying them and helping Black Doom. But they don't. And Black Doom always acts as if you never betrayed him. Like, he's always nagging Shadow to help him like a senile old man who just keeps on forgetting that he betrayed him. So, it's stupid. Like, it feels like your decision doesn't actually matter. In a game based around evil or good, you decide, there's no reason to be evil. Gun is very clearly shown as good but misguided. So there's no reason to understand why Shadow would turn against humanity again. Like, sure, Black Doom shows him what the humans did to him in the past, but we don't see very many examples of humanity being evil other than that. Like, there's so many missed opportunities for this plot. Like, we could have seen how Maria's death affected Eggman. Not just Shadow, but Eggman. And we could have seen Eggman's relationship with Gerald. Like, there's so little that we actually learn about Gerald. You'd think that the grandfather, the main villain of the series, would have more importance than that, but no. Like, one of the whole reasons the game was made was to fill in plot holes that SE2 had. But it kind of failed at doing that, because the only thing it explained was why the Eclipse Cannon was made in the first place, when, like, wouldn't it have taken a long time for Gerald to find out about Maria's death and rush to build it to destroy the world? Like, I think he would have gotten captured before he finished it, so he had to have built the Eclipse Cannon for a different purpose. And this game explains that. It explains that he built the Eclipse Cannon in order to destroy the Black Comet that the aliens lived on. And I'm not really a fan of aliens as Sonic because it's too sci-fi. Like, Sonic has always been a mixture of sci-fi and fantasy, with Eggman being a engineering genius and all, but still. Especially since the aliens in this game look really terrible. Like, they look so dark and black. I don't remember what they look like. They have such forgettable designs. At least the Wisps actually look like they belong in a Sonic game. Even if, again, they're aliens, so they don't really fit. And no one calls them out on that. Same goes for Sonic Chronicles. I don't really think the aliens in that game suit Sonic either. It's just Mass Effect, the Sonic game. But anyways, they explain that Shadow was made from Black Doom's blood. But all this does is really explain why his fur is black and red. And explains why Black Doom is able to control him, debilitate him, although he magically overcomes that later somehow. And it explains why Black Doom is so insistent on it working for him to take over the world and use humanity as fuel for some reason. It explains 3 things, one of which is extremely minor from SE2, and 2 of which are things that were just introduced for this game. What they should have done for Shadow's backstory was explain that he was created from the hedgehog DNA of Sonic's ancestor, like his grandfather. That would perfectly explain why Shadow has all of Sonic's abilities, as well as a few extra ones thrown in. But instead of that, instead of filling in the plot hole about how he's not a lizard like the Fire Lizard is, instead they just make him a Black Arms related person, and you just wonder why he doesn't look like the Black Arms aliens. So it's just kind of convoluted. I don't agree with people saying it's a retcon, because a retcon kind of by definition means that you're erasing something, taking something out. And no, this isn't really a retcon, this is just adding to the lore. It's not necessarily adding in a positive way, but it is technically developing on what was before. They never explicitly said in SA2 Shadow is not a Black Arms alien. They never explicitly said that he was not related to Black Doom, because Black Doom didn't even exist. But yeah, one of the biggest problems I have with Shadow's plot is that it makes Shadow look like a complete moron. And I'm not even a big Shadow fan. I find it boring because he barely expresses any emotion at all. I only really liked his character in SE2 because he was such an awesome villain, and had a tragic backstory that made him actually a well-rounded and sympathetic character rather than just villain for the sake of a villain. Like, I'm not even a big Shadow fan, but even I find it very annoying how he's such a moron in this game. He's just bumbling around, letting himself be manipulated by Black Doom. Like, if he knows about my past, then like it or not, I have to believe him. A lot of people didn't like that line. I mean, it was technically smart of him to trust him because he did know about his past. He did show him his past. That brings up the question of why he didn't just ask his friends about his past. But I'm guessing Rouge didn't want him to find out about his tragic backstory and want to destroy humanity again. They should have explained that though. And another thing is that Shadow would just have to take their word for it. That's how his past was. How is he supposed to know that the jewel thief he's friends with, and of course the more trustworthy the other friends of his, how is he supposed to trust that they're telling him the truth? Shadow's untrusting like that, which makes sense because of his past. So it makes sense that he would want to recover the memories for himself. Like, actually see the memories, not just be told about it. But again, they should have explained that. The whole Shadow amnesia plot never should have been existed in the first place. It's just a dumb excuse for Shadow to have his own game, which wasn't really necessary. There's no reason they couldn't have built in the plot holes and like a passing line in Heroes or something. I don't know. Well, I guess it did kind of need to exist, but anyways, like, the biggest problem I have with the cutscenes is that it ruins Shadow's character, making him look like such a moron. He's so easily manipulated when he was the one doing all the manipulating in SA2. He was so cunning at manipulating Eggman. Now, like, a lot of people, most of the problems that people have with the game are that it tries too hard to be edgy. Now, for the most part, I'm fine with well, not fine with, but I can understand how they make sense in universe, the edgy elements. Now, I don't understand why Shadow would reuse vehicles. Like, the motorcycle looks cool, and I can understand his personality if he wants to be cool. Like, he wants to be intimidating so that people won't mess with him. So it makes sense that he would use a motorcycle. The problem is that he can run faster than all those vehicles. Plus the vehicles suck in gameplay anyway. For the swearing, yeah, swearing doesn't really belong in Sonic when you think about it. I have a sneaking suspicion that if swearing was in the Archie comics, a lot more people would be fine with it. I mean, it literally was. I mean, Scourge, the Hedgehog, swore. It's just that his swearing was like random symbols for censorship purposes. But he still swore, and that made sense for his character. Practically everyone who swears in this game, it makes sense for their character, and it makes sense in universe for them to swear. SBO has always been edgy. Evil must die, beware my ninja powers. That was a literal line that he said. It makes sense for Shadow to swear, because he's a teenager who wants people to be intimidated by him. It fits his character. It doesn't fit Sonic's character though, because I don't think Sonic would say, damn, they got away! And like every time Shadow gets hit, he says, damn it. Now I would be a lot more fine with that if he said other things as well as damn it. Like if he had multiple different voice clips for getting hit, but instead, he always says that every time he gets hit. And it makes it feel kind of, it makes it feel kind of forced, but like, it would be a lot worse if in Sonic Colors, every time Sonic got hit, he said Baldy McNose hair. I mean, it would be funny at first, but then you'll get really tired of it. So, I don't think the swearing is nearly as bad as, like, the whole baldy nose hair and other extremely childish, like, toilet humor jokes and colors. Like, there's the thing, like, Shadow's plot is basically a Naked Gun movie. It's a dumb action movie, and the whole thing is that Sonic, as a concept, was heavily inspired by action movies. So it, at the very least, makes a lot more sense for this game to have an action movie plot than turning itself into a sitcom that's all about the comedy, when not everybody is going to find the jokes funny, which makes the plot inherently alienating. Like, this plot is alienating too. Like, just because Color's tone is shit doesn't mean that this tone is good either. Like, this is like a Naked Gun movie. Like, if this was more dark of a plot, Shadow would have thought a lot harder about destroying all the Black Arms aliens at once with the Eclipse Cannon, which they couldn't have possibly destroyed at the end of SE2 in the Hero's story ending, because Shadow needed to use it. And I don't think Gun would have repaired it. But my point is, like, Shadow would have dwelled on the moral implications of destroying an entire species, rather than just doing it, like an action movie. And another thing is, like you destroyed an entire city as one of the dark missions, but everyone was evacuated just in time. Oh, those poor buildings! Why did they have to be destroyed? Doesn't really have the same ring to it. And there's also an annoying mission in the game where you try to assassinate the president by destroying his plane, but he manages to be just fine. No real consequences for the story. Which makes sense. Like, another major problem with the story is that they never explain what's canon and what isn't. Even a throwaway line from the side characters in the last story explaining what Shadow did to help them would have done a lot towards establishing what's canon. But instead, you just wonder what happened. I like to think that everything is basically canon. Like, it went from dark to neutral to hero. Like, at first Shadow trusted Black Doom, but then he became more neutral as the heroes gradually forgave him. And then he became a hero and tried to stop Black Doom. And that makes a lot more sense. Of course it's canon that Shadow helped Team Chaotix, because the whole thing that Team Chaotix was trying to do the whole game was make it so that Gerald Robotnik's whole speech to Shadow about the Black Doom was broadcasted throughout the entire world. And I'm sure they didn't mean for it to be broadcast across the entire world, but, you know, it did lead to that event. But anyways, what I was going to say was, okay, the swearing kind of makes sense. Like, the human characters and the grizzled military commander, it makes sense for them to swear. In general, the swearing makes sense. I'm not superficial enough to say that they shouldn't be swearing just because of the way they look. Like, just because they look like cartoon characters doesn't mean they should be deprived of good writing characterization in a general sense. I don't think that swearing counts as good characterization stuff, obviously. I don't think they needed to have swearing in this game at all. I think the whole edginess thing is way overblown. At least this game still remembers that this is a franchise that was meant to be cool, so, you know, it tries to be cool. Does it really work It's all about making Shadow look cool, but he was already cool to begin with. So this just kind of comes off as trying too hard, like especially with Shadow with the guns. Why couldn't Shadow have just threw Chaos Spears? I don't think Shadow would use a gun considering that Maria was shot by one right in front of him. Wouldn't he be terrified of guns like Batman? Wouldn't he hate them? Like another thing, terrified. Like, if this plot was dark, we would have Shadow having PTSD from his past. Instead, he just remembers what happened to Maria and says, "That gruesome image." And he's just serious and confused. If Shadow had PTSD, he would be scared thinking about his past. And he would get hysterical and think that it was happening again. But he doesn't. So, that's not really a dark plot then. Like, it's dark in the sense that it's an alien invasion, and so you got a dark and grim, boring-looking color palette, and aliens constantly attacking the city. I don't like the huge focus on human characters we don't care about, like the president constantly worrying about the city and country being attacked by aliens. But, like, if this plot was really dark, you wouldn't have all of these lighthearted elements, like the lighthearted side characters who are genre-savvy enough to realize that everything's going to be just fine. Like, you would have Amy and Vector and Charmy and every other lighthearted character in the plot be all depressed because of the alien invasion, and something really bad would happen to Cream to get the audience's sympathy. But nothing like that ever happens. Instead, Sonic is just as lighthearted as he always was. Sonic is lighthearted, Charmy's lighthearted, Vector is lighthearted, Amy's lighthearted, Cream is lighthearted. Basically, every side character we see is lighthearted. In fact, this game actually has jokes that make me laugh more than Colors does. You have Charmy, Vector, and SBO trying to get a portal to cyberspace to appear. Like, SBO's like, at this rate, the whole day would be wasted. And Charmy says, yeah! Whole day wasted! I always laugh when I hear that line. Like, I don't know, just something about it is pretty charming. And it comes from Charmy, of course. And I like how, like, Shadow would just karate chop the computer and somehow that would make it work. And then Charmy does the same thing again, and you'd expect a subversion where it doesn't work and Charmy looks like a fool. But instead, it actually happens. It's also kind of funny how you have this space shuttle with elevator shafts that can be operated by a little girl. A little girl who's dying of having no immune system at that. Like, again, why did the game just explain that Maria had NIDS? And that the whole reason Shadow was created in the first place was to get a cure for Maria. They could have shown Maria suffering from NIDS. It could have shown how the disease was affecting her physically and emotionally. That would have created a lot more sympathy for her and made her death a lot more tragic. We already knew that she was a sweet little girl. We didn't need to be shown it. We needed to be shown that she had a disease that Shadow needed to cure. You're telling me that guns and violence is not bad enough to be censored out? But Maria having a disease, oh no. That's something we can only learn from Sonic Battle. Like, there's just so much missed opportunities with the plot. I don't think the guns were necessary. I don't think the swearing was necessary, but not the end of the world. Because it was only in character for everyone to do it. I don't think the vehicles were necessary. And I didn't really like the alien invasion plot either, like, at all. But I think people are overblowing it and acting like the edgy elements were the only thing wrong with the story. And it just wasn't. Like, I can understand why Shadow would be dumb enough to trust Black Doom, in the sense that he was only a week old when he was ejected from the Ark. So he's kind of young, don't you think? Like obviously he was created 50 years ago, but he was in stasis for most of his life. So it doesn't really matter that he existed for 50 years. He doesn't have 50 years of experience. If anything, he has like barely a week of experience. Of course he would be easily manipulated. Just because you can easily manipulate people doesn't mean you're immune to being manipulated yourself. But even though there's justification, they never explain that justification, and that's not enough for me to not be annoyed just watching the cutscenes. It doesn't help that this is the game that introduced the 4Kids voice cast, and having models from Heroes with the 4Kids voice cast is very jarring and off-putting. I think it would have gone over a little bit better if they replaced the voice cast starting with the next generation of consoles rather than Shadow, you know? But yeah, I think I've talked enough about the game. And then there's 06, the game that nearly killed the franchise. But you know what it did kill? The adventure game formula. Now, a lot of people like to say that there isn't a formula. I think there is. It's multiple playable characters. And rather than having the boosts, they have, like, the spin dash jump for taking shortcuts. Although I say that, but 06 doesn't really let you jump out of the spin dash. But it's still clearly an adventure game. So I guess multiple playable characters and not having the boost and drift and other stuff, that makes it an adventure game, in my book. And because of that, because of the 06 reception, this scared Sega away from making any game with the positive elements of the adventure games. It's because of 06 that they threw the baby out with the bathwater and led to something completely new, which was fantastic for gameplay, horrible for story writing. The game is very slow and boring, and it has way too much emphasis on forced combat. Now, I was able to put up with that in Heroes, mostly because of the whole Team Blast mechanic. Really made things a lot easier. But yeah, all the characters are too slow. It's not very well programmed. It's like Sonic 4 because the speed is all about scripted sequences, and that's it. It's mainly about the platforming, but the controls are so bad that it's kind of difficult to even do that. It's not bad in the sense of the boost games where you move way too fast and it's stiff and awkward and weird. I don't know, I played the PC 06 demo and the acceleration was like Amy Rose, where you would constantly end up stopping when you didn't want to, and you couldn't keep momentum for the life of you. But I heard that Sonic was more weighty in that demo, and in the actual game, he's not. I don't know. I've never really played the game, so I can't give it the full vitriol and hatred that it deserves. Clement's review does a much better job with showing off everything bad about the game. Although there is one point I heavily disagree on. The point where he goes on a rant about how Sonic is a cartoon. I always roll my eyes at that. Yes, it is a cartoon character, but that doesn't mean good writing and characterization should be sacrificed because of it. Yes, Sonic should be realistic because it uses magic all the time, like Sonic runs at the speed of sound. If it was realistic, you wouldn't have any of that. But realistic and dark or not lighthearted tone are two completely different things. Like in general, I guess I prefer it for being lighthearted, but not cartoony to the point of making me embarrassed to be watching it. And it just still gets serious and have a sense of stakes, you know? The Adventure 1 did it perfectly. But my point is, the main, like, all the problems with 06 have basically already been talked about, which is why I kind of, like I get it, it's so bad that it makes sense that people still talk about it to this day. It makes sense that it's still joked about. I hate how it completely ruined the reputation of the series among mainstream gamers. I mean, regular Joes still sort of know who Sonic is, or at least, well, regular Joes think that he died in the 90s, which is weird. Really weird. Like, a lot of people still like the series, even people who aren't Sonic fans. But really, the plot of the game is really complicated, but not in a way that's hard to understand. It's more in the sense that it has time travel in it, and I hate time travel in stories. See, all three of the stories of the game have problems that could have been solved within seconds by just having Chaos Control time travel them. All three of the character stories, all three of those goals, fighting Mephiles, saving Elise, and saving the future. All of those three goals could have been accomplished by time traveling to the right place. Like, the plot seemed to be building up to Shadow and Silver time traveling so that Mephiles and Iblis were never created. It seemed to be building up to that when they traveled to the point where he was created, but instead, Shadow just takes the Scepter of Darkness and tries to imprison him again in the future, in the present, I mean. And Silver, he doesn't go back in time to stop that. In fact, he just leaves the blue Chaos Emerald with Elise as a child, even though Sonic needs to use that emerald to go super, and he had no problem doing that over and over again. It's just confusing. Like, there's a lot of plot holes in the story. In general, I really appreciate how it tries. Like, it tries, and that alone makes me respect it. It's very engaging, and there are a lot of things that, like, I felt so bad for Silver with this whole post-apocalyptic future, like, backstory. I first saw the game in PokeCaptain's Let's Play, which is actually the first Let's Play I ever watched, and probably is the reason that I started doing post-commentaries to begin with. Because of PokeCaptain's LP, that was my first experience with any Sonic game past Sonic Advance, and past Adventure 2, and the 4Kids voice cast. But anyways, like, I appreciate how it has emotional impact in the sense that it makes you feel sorry for Silver for his tragic future. Although I kind of think that the post-apocalyptic wasteland idea is too dark, and it's not even used to its full potential because you never actually see the people of the future and how they live. For all you know, it's just Silver and Blaze, and they're just delusional about other people existing. So it kind of loses that impact. Like, I don't think of it as the world where Station Square existed. I think of it as the world that Silver lives in. And for that matter, why is Blaze even there? They could have easily explained it as Blaze coming from the Soul Dimension to Silver's future and helping him. But instead, they try to act as if Blaze was a childhood friend. Although they never actually explicitly say that. Not once, actually. Like, they imply that she's been helping Silver for quite some time, but they never, at any point, explicitly say that Blaze is from the future. The confusing thing is she says Blue Hedgehog, as if she doesn't actually, as if she knows who Sonic is, but is still too stupid to realize that he's innocent and is not the Iblis Trigger. I think the weird thing is that in the Japanese version, blue and naive mean the same thing. Like, they have the same word in Japanese. So she basically said naive hedgehog. And so she could have been calling Silver naive, which makes you wonder why she didn't just tell Silver that Mephiles was tricking him. I guess she was just really desperate for a way to save the future and travel to the past. Even if Sonic necessarily wasn't the one. Like, it's weird. Do you think that Silver's future would have records of Sonic being a hero? Although I guess they would have been destroyed. Like, Silver lives in a post-apocalyptic world. How is he supposed to know what obviously evil was? How is he supposed to know that Mephiles was evil? Like, just looking at him. Like, even the word Mephiles the Dark could just mean to him, Mephiles the guy who really hates Iblis. Because dark is the opposite of light, and light would be associated most with Iblis. I hate hindsight reasoning and storytelling. The other major problem with 06's plot, besides the time travel, is the whole Princess Elise, a human, is involved in an epic romance with Sonic the Hedgehog. Which is kind of weird. Well, kind of. More like extremely weird. I don't hate Elise. I hate the fact that she's involved in this romance. Fun fact, the person who wrote Sonic's story in 06 was a woman. Which actually explains a lot, and that's coming from me, a woman. But yeah, I don't really think it belongs to Sonic. The biggest reason I don't think it belongs to Sonic is mainly because it's a human and a hedgehog. Like, in the Archie comics, you have romance in the sense that it's constantly chipping Sonic and Sally. Or it was before the reboot. But the reboot doesn't really count, so whatever. Like, I don't know. Sonic is about action. Not really about Sonic bonding with this princess and teaching her how great friendship is and getting her out on an adventure, getting her to be excited, opening up, which is heartwarming, but also kind of a bit too laid back. Like, it's weird, Sonic has the more feminine type of story, when you think that would be the case with Silver. Like, Shadow has the manly story because he's the one actually getting things done. He's the main character of the story, not Sonic. Shadow is the one fighting Mephiles. Shadow is the one who fights Iblis and Mephiles. Sonic is just fighting Iblis at one point because he happens to be there. And Shadow was fighting him at the same time, so... Like, the only reason Sonic ever fought Solaris at all was because he happened to be there in the last story, after he got revived from the dead by Elise kissing him with the power of the Chaos Emeralds. Which was, obviously, something that I always look away from. At least it was really brief and was obscured by a flash of light right away. I don't see why she had to kiss him. Like, aside from the whole it was being an epic romance drama, which again, I don't really see the point of. Even if Elise was a Mobian, which would probably make her more competent and less likely to get kidnapped because she'd have powers to be more durable and stuff. Like, she can't help getting kidnapped. She's a sheltered princess. Why would she have combat skills? And she's a human. The only special power she's been shown to have is when Sonic is carrying Elise, she creates a fire shield around herself that can technically attack enemies, except it doesn't extend out far enough, so you just get hit by enemies when you run into them. And more importantly, it lets you float over water, so you can run over water and fiery sand. Or, like, not fiery sand, I'm thinking of Generations. The sand you sink through. As if you just clip through the floor. Yeah, it's weird. But anyways, like, the princess can't really help getting kidnapped. It just feels extremely repetitive how she gets kidnapped over and over and over again. She's definitely a lot more likable than Peach. She's a normal person rather than a stuck-up royal. Like, even though she's sheltered, she's still a nice person and not really spoiled. Like, she cares about the people. She seems pretty nice. Like, I don't hate Elise. I just hate the writing around her, with it being an epic romance. Like with her selfishly saying, I don't care what happens to the world, when she was just about to blow out the flame of Solaris to make it so that Mephiles and Iblis would never be created, and thus she wouldn't meet Sonic. And so they wouldn't get involved. Well, they never really got involved in the story. Like, they were just friends. Like, it was strongly implied that Elise had a crush on him for some reason, even though they're not proportioned correctly to each other, and so it can't work. But Sonic wasn't exactly wildly out of character proclaiming his love to her the entire time. Like he was kind of, if anything, kind of, I don't know, bashful about her have kind of a crush on him. I wouldn't say bashful either, just kind of shocked. I don't know. Like I love how Shadow is portrayed. Like how Shadow basically redeems himself after looking like a complete moron in Shadow the Hedgehog. He gets to be the hero of his own story. He stands up to Mephiles when Mephiles tries to get him to join him, like Black Doom. Like, Mephiles tries to prove to him that people sealed him away in the future because he was too powerful and they blamed him for things going wrong. Like, they showed Shadow being nailed to a cross, which I never really saw the cross when I saw the cutscenes so much. Like, all I saw was the cross, the diamond-shaped red force field around it. I couldn't even see Shadow in there at all, so I wasn't really sure what it was. It's not very good cutscene imagery. But anyways, I just love how Shadow basically shows his character development by not joining Mephiles. And the thing is that, unfortunately, his fighting Mephiles is pointless because Mephiles just creates an army of clones over and over again. He can't beat him because he just breaks out of the scepter and just creates armies of clones. He can only beat him when he becomes Solaris. So he's invincible in his Mephiles form but not in his all-powerful, time and space transcending form? That's arbitrary. Like, a lot of the times the plot just goes the way it does because the writers want it to. None of the characters use time travel in smart ways because the writers don't want them to. Like, Sonic could have easily solved the Elise problem by just warping with Chaos Control so that she was on the other side of the world so Eggman couldn't get to her. So like putting her with Gun, where she'd be safe. Then he could just go back to Soliana and fight Eggman. Like, the Soliana was being run just fine without her, so she was only a figurehead. She was clearly just there. Like her not being there just lowered morale. And even then the civilians didn't seem all that worked up. So why didn't Sonic just do that? Not to mention the fact that with Silver, his telekinesis is awesome, but it's also so overpowered that he needs to be made to act stupid and out of character in order to not make the plot be done in 2 seconds. Like one of the reasons he didn't kill Sonic immediately was that he was stalling because of his conscience. He didn't really want to be a killer. That's why I liked Silver, that he's a good person and he's well-meaning. He's naive and socially awkward, but well-meaning. But he doesn't kill Sonic right away because he hesitates and because Sonic's friends save him. Amy one time and Shadow another time. I can understand him not doing anything to Amy because he grew attached to her. Like, that's the thing. He spends time with Amy because that's a really good way of getting him to realize what he's really fighting for. He gets to appreciate the world that isn't ruined by Iblis. Like, he appreciates a desert of all things. Like, that shows him what he's fighting for. It makes his coming to the conclusion, it makes him more natural. Like, later he wonders if it's right to kill someone to save the world. I guess him progressing to that point is more natural because of Amy. But anyways, it makes sense that he wouldn't right away use his full powers against Amy. I don't understand why Sonic would just leave, like, Amy with him. I guess he just has a lot of faith in her to talk him down, because she talked down Shadow. But still, like, how does Sonic know that Silver isn't just going to kill her? I don't know. But my point is, why didn't Silver just use his full powers against Shadow and win instantly? The whole reason he won so quickly against Sonic was because he telekinetically grabbed him and threw him to the wall. Why didn't he just do that with Shadow? Shadow is just as fast as Sonic. At least in SC2 anyways. And sure, he has extra chaos powers, but still. He's still basically a Sonic clone, so Silver should have just grabbed him telekinetically and won against him too. It kind of makes Shadow look like a Gary Stu winning against Silver. I mean, it makes sense that he would be able to stop time and kick him in the back of the head, which was a pretty satisfying moment. Very genre-savvy. You don't really see that in stories. Especially not when they don't break the fourth wall to be very smug about how genre-savvy and how brilliant the writers were at making the characters look genre-savvy. Or this didn't really do that, which was good. But yeah, just, I don't know. I don't really like the plot of 06 in the sense that it's kind of stupid. It's kind of full of plot holes because of the time travel and Elise. But it introduced a lot of cool concepts like Silver and Nephilis. I like that. Like, there's a lot of things that are great about it, but there's also kind of some confusing things. Like, how do you, like, they never made it clear what exactly the rules were with Iblis getting out of Elise. If Elise dies, does that release Iblis? Like, regardless of whether she cries or not? Because they try to imply that Elise died upon the Eggman's battleship crashing. So I'm assuming we're supposed to believe that she cried because of that. And that's what caused Silver's future. But the thing is, though, that, okay, if her dying is what releases Iblis, then sealing Iblis in her just delays the inevitable. It would have been a lot smarter to just put Elise on Pluto so that when Iblis finally got out of her, it wasn't actually hurting innocent people. I mean, of course they wouldn't really want to do that to her right away, because she's the princess, and so a lot of people like her. So they would feel a lot better about just keeping her around, letting her have a happy life, and I guess waiting until she's really old to send her to the moon. I don't know. I don't understand why the Duke didn't just seal Iblis inside of him, and like, he would die, and Iblis would be kept in him. It would never have a reason to get released because he'd never cry. But that must be how Iblis works, where it releases after you die. Because otherwise, the Duke would have sealed inside of him. Unless he was the only one who could seal Iblis inside of people, because like he had the Chaos Emerald and he could say the chant that would seal Solaris into people. I don't know why he couldn't just teach that to Silver. I mean, Silver was able to do it and seal Iblis inside of Blaze, who disappeared for no reason whatsoever, and that made Silver's future nice again. Although it's already ruined, so having a blue sky doesn't really fix anything. Like, we never actually saw people rejoicing after that happened, and Solaris happened right afterwards, so it rendered everything completely pointless. I don't know why Silver didn't just go back with Sonic, like, after Radical Train to make sure that he wouldn't screw up. Well, not Radical Train, and I forget. After Kingdom Battle, right. Yeah, it's just kind of confusing as all. Like, technically the Duke of Soliana is the Iblis trigger because he created Solaris he didn't create Solaris, but he created Nephilis and Iblis from it in a noble effort to revive his dead wife. So why didn't Silver just make sure he'd never be born or something? I guess, like, at the very least, show him photographic evidence of the consequences of his experiment. If he had done that, then he would have saved his future without having to kill anyone. Like, the plot was not thought out very well, but they still tried, at least. I think I've talked way too much about this, so let's move on, because a whole bunch of other people have already talked way too much about this as it is.